It's Mississippi, 1875. The war is over, but the South still drips with hatred. The fields are quiet, but the saloons are loud, filled with bitter white men, former Confederates and Klansmen, clinging to the last scraps of their stolen power. They drink, spit, and swap stories about the good old days when black men knew their place, when a slave couldn't vote, when nobody like him would dare walk through the front door. A black senator, a former slave, a man who had terrified white supremacists just by standing tall. They had tried to erase him that night, ambushed in a basement by men who couldn't beat him in life. But even with a bullet in his skull, he refused to fall like a coward. "Remember, when you kill me, you kill a gentleman and a brave man. Never say you killed a coward," said Caldwell. This is the story of the blacksmith turned senator who bent the chains of slavery into weapons of justice, and the nightmare he became for every racist in Mississippi. Because when Charles Caldwell spoke, everybody listened. And when white America tried to silence him, they learned one brutal lesson: you can kill a man, but you can never kill a movement. But how exactly did Charles Caldwell come to power? And what exactly did he do that was so hated by those old Southern racists? Keep watching to find out. To understand Charles Caldwell, you have to understand where he came from. And we need to go back to Mississippi, the beating heart of America's racial nightmare. Nobody wanted to be a slave, but no slave wanted to be in Mississippi. The phrase "sold down the river" struck terror in the hearts of slaves in Virginia and North Carolina because they knew what awaited them: brutal labor under the Mississippi sun, cotton and sugar plantations in conditions designed to break both body and spirit. The rice plantations were especially brutal. Slaves forced to stand in water for hours while malaria ran rampant, with child mortality rates reaching a staggering 90% on some plantations. Charles Caldwell was born into this living hell in 1831. And while most slaves were worked to death in the cotton fields, Caldwell found himself in a different kind of prison, a blacksmith shop in Clinton, just outside Jackson. Here's the thing about blacksmiths in the South, though. It was probably the best job a slave could get. Every plantation, every slave master, every overseer depended on them. Without blacksmiths, the whole machine of slavery would have collapsed. And Caldwell's craftsmanship set him apart. Even in chains, he commanded respect within his community. His work was so perfect, so precise, that even those who claimed to own him couldn't deny his mastery. As a skilled blacksmith, he enjoyed more autonomy than other plantation slaves, though he remained firmly in chains. But in that forge in Clinton, Mississippi, Caldwell was laying the foundation for a future none of his masters could ever imagine. That future arrived sooner than anyone expected. By 1865, the Civil War had shattered the chains of slavery, and for a brief moment, a new dawn seemed possible. They called it Reconstruction. And in Mississippi, where black people outnumbered whites, Reconstruction was supposed to create a society where blacks lived on equal footing with white folk. And for a brief few years, this was starting to become true. In 1867, Mississippi started letting freed black men vote, and Caldwell's hard work finally paid off. His reputation in Clinton had earned him significant respect within the community. That respect turned into political power. By 1868, this former slave, a man who once couldn't legally read or write, was chosen as one of 16 black Republican delegates to Mississippi's Constitutional Convention. And Caldwell wasn't there to play nice. As a radical Republican, he fought for things that would make a white supremacist blood boil: the right for black men to vote, public education for all, and complete political equality. But you see, this wasn't just about one man changing his position. This was about creating real power within the black community. For the first time, black voices were in the room where decisions were being made. Black hands were drafting laws. Black minds were shaping Mississippi's future. The white power structure watched in horror as men like Caldwell, men they once claimed to own, stepped into positions of authority. And of course, Caldwell, being Caldwell, did more than just participate. He excelled. See, Caldwell's experience at the forge had taught him something crucial: how to shape raw material into something powerful. Only now, instead of shaping iron, he was helping forge a new Mississippi. The former masters were about to learn that they'd created their own worst nightmare: a black leader who knew their system inside and out, who understood their weaknesses, and who wasn't afraid to strike while the iron was hot. In 1870, Caldwell struck his first blow: the Mississippi State Senate. For 5 straight years, he fought for things that kept slave owners awake at night: the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. The 14th Amendment would make every black person born in America a citizen with all the rights that came with it. The 15th Amendment would make sure no state could ever deny a man the right to vote based on race. But here's the thing about being a black senator in Mississippi, pushing for revolutionary changes like these: the more power you gained, the bigger target you became. And some people couldn't stand seeing a former slave wielding this kind of influence. The white power structure didn't wait long to strike back. Right after the Constitutional Convention, a highly respected white judge's son decided to teach Caldwell a lesson. Drew his gun, took his shot. But those hands that worked steel for decades weren't just for show. In one fluid motion, Caldwell dodged the bullet and fired back. The judge's son was dead before he hit the ground. Another fool who thought he could break a man that slavery couldn't keep down. This was Mississippi in the 1870s. A black man terminating a white judge's son meant certain death. When the trial was set with an all-white jury, everyone knew how this story was supposed to end, with Caldwell swinging from a rope. But none of that happened. That all-white jury looked at the evidence and looked at Caldwell. And they all did something that had never done before in Mississippi history. They found the black man not guilty, and Caldwell walked free. Caldwell wasn't just any senator anymore. He was also a crack shot, a fearless man, and racists everywhere began to fear him. Even his enemies had to admit, wherever this man went, whether that was inside a forge or in the halls of the Senate, he commanded respect. But if there's one thing we learn about history, it's that respect comes at a steep price. And Caldwell's enemies were just getting started. By the way, if you like the sort of content we share on this channel, please leave a like and click that subscribe button. We want to spread the untold stories of these black heroes far and wide. Charles Caldwell wasn't interested in just being feared. He wanted something even more dangerous: change. And so, even while he still felt the pain of slavery and had just recently survived an attempt on his life, Caldwell still believed in something radical: that blacks and whites could actually share political space. He helped organize a Republican rally on September 4th, 1875, in Moss Hill, Clinton, Mississippi. Then, he did something unthinkable. He invited Democrats, the party of slave owners and racists, to come speak. 2,000 black citizens showed up that day, bringing their families for what was supposed to be a peaceful gathering of picnicking and politics. The organizers banned weapons and alcohol. They were trying to do this the right way, but among the crowd were 18 armed white liners drunk ex-Confederate soldiers who made up the Democratic Party's unofficial attack squad. These weren't politicians. These were the attack dogs of white supremacy. For 1 hour, everything seemed possible. The Democratic speaker, Amos R. Johnston, gave his speech. The black crowd listened respectfully. But the moment a Republican speaker took the stage, those 18 drunk white liners started heckling. When Republican newspaper editor Captain H.T. Fisher took the stage, the white liners started calling him a liar, making moves to disrupt the rally. Caldwell and other organizers tried stepping in, pleading for calm. Then it happened. Shots rained down on them, and immediately, 3 whites and 5 blacks died in the chaos, including 2 children. The crowd scattered in panic, running in every direction to escape the random spray of bullets. But this was just the beginning. A lie spread through the white community. Blacks were planning to attack Clinton. It was all the excuse they needed. Over the next 2 days, hundreds of armed white liners poured into town by train. Their ranks swelled by the hour. And then, the hunt began. No black man would be allowed to leave alive. More than 500 black men fled to Jackson, desperately seeking protection from the U.S. Army. Others disappeared into the surrounding swamps and woods. But for those who couldn't escape, the white liners moved unopposed through Hinds County, dragging black citizens from their homes, shooting them on the spot. Any house they found empty, they looted. They hunted black men through the streets like shooting birds. Sarah Dickey, a white educator who witnessed the carnage, wrote desperately to President Grant, "Whoever says to you that our troubles in Mississippi are slight sanctions their slaughter." By the time the bloodbath ended, somewhere between 35 and 50 black people perished. Most of their names would never be recorded, their bodies never found. But Caldwell wasn't about to watch his people get slaughtered. He organized a militia and led them through Clinton, protecting what was left of the black community. But to the white power structure, a black man with a gun protecting black citizens, that was a death sentence. They'd been looking for an excuse to get rid of Charles Caldwell. Now they had one. The September massacre changed everything. It was a sign that the white power structure wanted to destroy whatever Caldwell was building. Mississippi's Republican Governor Ames wrote to President Grant begging for federal troops, but Grant's response was underwhelming. He said he was weary of these annual autumnal outbreaks in the South. On October 13th, backed into a corner, Ames sat down with Democratic leaders for a peace conference. The deal was simple. He'd disband the black militia Caldwell organized if the white liners promised to stop the violence. Ames eventually folded. But to trust the promises of white men during those times was about as solid as writing a contract on toilet paper. The violence against blacks never stopped, and black people were again left on their own. By November 2nd, the terror campaign had served its purpose. Without any military protection, black voters faced a choice: stay home or die. The Democrats seized control of the state legislature. Even Caldwell, despite his reputation for fearlessness, lost his Senate seat. But Caldwell wasn't built to stay quiet. On Election Day, when other Republicans were backing down from Democratic threats, Caldwell had stood his ground. "No, we are going to stay right here. You must just come right along and keep your mouth shut. I don't care what they say to you. Don't you say a word." That's the kind of defiance that defined Caldwell. Even after losing power, he stayed in Clinton, continued protecting his community, refusing to bow to white intimidation. And that's what drove him to act on December 25th, 1875, when he heard his nephew, David Washington, had been threatened and harassed by local white men. Even after everything, Caldwell was still trying to protect his own. That Christmas Day, Caldwell went into town to find out what was happening with his nephew. At some point, he ran into Buck Cabell. The two had known each other for years. Like many white men in Clinton, Cabell had watched Caldwell rise, from blacksmith to senator, from enslaved man to leader. They weren't friends, not really. But in the tangled aftermath of the massacre, old familiarity could be mistaken for trust. Cabell kept insisting they share a Christmas drink to celebrate the holiday. Caldwell didn't want to go. He wanted to get home to his wife, to celebrate Christmas with family. But Cabell was relentless, and so the two went down to the basement of Chilton's store. As they touched their glasses in a toast, it happened. The window behind Caldwell exploded with gunfire. The first shot hit him in the head. But Charles Caldwell, even with a bullet in his skull, wasn't going to die like a dog. Wounded but conscious, he made one last request: to die like a man, out in the open. They carried him into the street. While Caldwell was bleeding to death, he straightened up, fixed his blood-stained clothes, looked his killers dead in the eye, and spoke words that would echo through history. "Remember, when you kill me, you kill a gentleman and a brave man. Never say you killed a coward. I want you to remember it when I am gone." Then 40 shots rang out. The bravest man in Mississippi fell in a hail of bullets. Not long after, they went looking for more. This time it was Caldwell's younger brother, Samuel. Samuel wasn't a senator or a politician. He didn't carry a gun. He wasn't making speeches or organizing rallies. He was just Charles Caldwell's brother. And for the men who had already eliminated one Caldwell that night, that was all they needed to know. They found Samuel and terminated him as well. Punishment by association. That night, the intent turned to desecration. The mob stormed Caldwell's home, where his wife had laid out the bodies of both brothers for burial. She'd tried to give them a proper goodbye, but the mob wasn't about to have that. Instead, they flipped the coffins and spat on their faces. They cursed their names and mocked them in death, just as they had tried to erase them in life. Because that's how cowards operate. They don't show up when the fight is fair. They wait until you're alone, until you're gone, and then they come for the memory, thinking if they ruin what's left, they can erase what mattered. So what happened to the cowards who ambushed Caldwell in that cellar? Predictably, nothing. His killers, even though they were known figures within the white community, walked away free. Caldwell's death marked the brutal, violent end of Reconstruction's promise in Mississippi and across the South. Getting rid of a man like Caldwell, a powerful, elected black leader, sent a chillingly clear message. Black political power would not be tolerated. It was the beginning of the rollback, the start of Jim Crow's shadow creeping across the land, erasing the gains that men like Caldwell worked so hard towards. But even if they killed the man, they couldn't kill the idea. Today, there's no statue of Charles Caldwell towering over the Mississippi Capitol, no national holiday, no required school curriculum. But if you walk to the corner of Leek and Jefferson Streets in Clinton, the spot where he perished, you'll find a small historical marker. It stands not just to mark the place where he died, but to remind those who pass by that someone once stood here, unafraid, unbought, and unwilling to be silent. If you're not ready to let the black man's story end here, there's more. There was another brave soul who stood up when no one else would. Another man who terrified the white supremacists so badly, they called in the help of the FBI. I would like to think in another universe, Charles Caldwell was friends with this man. Click here to watch the story of Robert F. Williams, the black man who terrified white America.